Gemara Chasima Tova. Aleph.
Mach's Tova.
Okay. Okay. Today's daf, Be'ez Hashem, is Masechta Zevachim Daf Yud Aleph. So let's just review. We're going to start from Yud Amud Beis, and we're going to cover some ground now. Just to review the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Kol HaZvachim, any carbon, Shnis B'chul Shloi Lishmam, that you shechted it for not its sake. In other words, let's say it was a carbon shlamim, and you shechted it and you said it should be a carbon oila, Kisherim, that's kosher. The Mishnah said that the owner has to bring a new carbon. It's kosher. You don't throw out the carbon. You continue making it a carbon shlamim, but the owner has to re-bring a new carbon shlamim because the shchita, the person that was doing the shchita, said something wrong. Chutz min pesach. Let's say you have a carbon pesach and you shechted it for an oila, or a chatas, or carbon chatas, and you shechted it for an oila. So then the pesach bisman, then it's pasos. So says the Tanakama. We're going to have like 5 opinions. In our Mishnah, there's 4 opinions, and the next Mishnah has a 5th opinion. So that is the opinion, that a chatas is different. The chatas is different than any other carbon, that if you shecht it, a chatas, and say it's an oila, automatically you throw out the whole thing because you passed the carbon. Rab Leza says, Afa Osham, even a carbon Osham is the same as a carbon chata. So let's read the Gemara. We are on Daf Yomi Zevachim Daf on the bottom, towards the bottom. Tanan Hasam. So Yomi Zevachim Daf, Tanan Hasam, we learned over there. Tanan Hasam, we learned over there. Shahaya Rabbi Kiva Omer. Rabbi Kiva says, this refers to like this: Kol damim, any blood, sheniknesu laheichal, that went into the heichal. The heichal is this main building, as you see on your screen, right? As you know that the carbon was shechted on the north and then brought to the mizbeach hachitzoin. But let's say the guy took the blood. A person took the blood and brought it into the main sanctuary. Okay, he brought it into the main sanctuary. So the pasuk says that if you take a carbon chatas and bring it into the main sanctuary, I don't know, you just walked into it with as carrying the blood before you sprinkled it on the mizbeach hachitzon, you passed the whole carbon. Says the Mishnah. The Rabbi Kiva says every blood that you bring into the heichal l'chaper psulim, it's passel. Because he darshans, Rabbi Kiva has the pasuk. It says v'chol chatas asher yuva midama, and we darshan v'chol, any carbon that is brought into the heichal becomes pasal. The Chachamim says no, chatas bavad. Only the chatas becomes pasal. And Rabbi Leza says afa osham. The key is that osham is the same din as a chatas. Shenema, because the pasuk juxtaposes chatas ka osham. Whatever psul is by a chatas is by an asim. So now, Bishlam says the Gemara Reb Leza could come and time it. Reb Leza explained his reason that I have a pasuk, the chatas and ashim are the same, one of the same. El Rabbi Rabbanim, my tama. What's the reason Rabbanim that they only passed chatas? Really, the pasuk juxtaposes that chatas and ashim should be the same. So an ashim should also be passel if you bring the blood into the sanctuary. Rava says like this: ashim nichnas damilufnim pasol lematzas amrit. Chachamim will say that you can't say an asham that's brought in blood into the sanctuary with pasol. That you can't say because kal v'chaymer ma'oila. I have a kal v'chaymer from a carbon oila. We go ma'oila. We go on Daf Yud Aleph and Aleph. Ma'oila she kolol. Oila is totally burnt up. There's no part of it that belongs to. No one can eat any part of it. But nichnas damilufnim kashera. If the blood of the oila went into the heichal, right? This carbon is still kosher. Asham she'ena kol, an asham that's not entirely burned up, like kolshkein, certainly it should be kosher. So that's certainly it should be kosher. So that was the kal v'chomer that the chachamim used. Says the Gemara mala oila shekein ene b'cha peres. But an oila, the reason why it doesn't become possible because an oila is like a weaker carbon than an asham. Why is an oila a weaker carbon than an asham? Even though an oil is totally kalil, burnt up, but an oil shekain ein mechaperes. It's not brought to bring about atonement. So an asham, which is brought about to bring atonement, maybe an asham would be would be an asham would become pasul. So the Gemara says minchas choite techia. A mincha of a choite will prove the point. One of the things that we have by a minchas choite, which is which was the oh, here it is. We have a minchas chayta. If a person does a certain avera, sometimes you bring, if you're so poor, then you bring flour into as a carbon. So let's say by a shvua avera, right? There's carbon oil of yared. If you bring that flour into the base of Mikdash, you didn't into the sanctuary. It doesn't passel. So oil minchas chayta will prove that it's a kapara. It's bring about an atonement for a shvua, and yet if you bring it into the sanctuary, it doesn't become passel. Says the Gemara interrupts with just a question. Why are you saying just the minchas oila? If you, the mincha, the flour that's brought into the sanctuary, even the chatas of a bird that's brought into the sanctuary doesn't become passel. Answers the Gemara, chatas oiv boyed Rabbavan. It's not so clear. Rabbavan had a question. Maybe it does become passel, the blood of a chatas oiv. So now we have a point. How do we know an asham should not become passel? Because a minchas chayte, the flour that's brought into sanctuary, it doesn't become passel. So the blood of an asham that goes into the sanctuary will also not become passel. Says the Gemara of a lifloich. Then let's ask a question. Mala minchas chayte shkein eina min zevach. A minchas chayte is not like a blood. So of course, it's not blood that's coming into you're not bringing in a cup of blood into the sanctuary over here. So therefore, it doesn't become pasul. But in asham, if I shechted the asham and bring it into the sanctuary, maybe that will come pasul. So then we go backwards. Oila techiach. Then oila will prove that that's not the point. Oila, that's the blood of an oila that's brought into the sanctuary, does not become pasul. The chazar adin, and we go back and forth. Each one has a kula that the other one doesn't have. But outside the shava but the common denominator of both the oila and the minchas chayta is very simple. Shehein kachi kachim, they're both kachi kadim. The nichnas lifnim, if they brought their bloods into the sanctuary, kasherim, the carbon is still kosher. Afani avi ashim, so I'll bring the carbon ashim, shu kodesh kodashim, it's kodesh kodashim, v'nichnas dame lifnim, and you bring the blood inside the sanctuary, it will remain kosher. So that's the point. How do you know an ashim? We're trying to understand. The Gemara is going to get back to another question. Then what did the Chachamim do? The Torah says the chatas is compared to an asham. Well, I mean, what are you going to do with that? But anyway, the Chachamim's opinion is only a chatas, if you bring the blood into the kodesh kodashim, if you bring it into the sanctuary, the carbon is possible, but not an asham. Amalei Rava Barnish L'Rav Ashi Lifroich, but I could ask a question. Malik Shada Shava Shabhem, the tzara shava of both the oila, the common denominator of both the oila and the minchas chayta, shekein ein lem kitzva. There's no minimum price that the carbon should cost. You can pay any amount. Taima ba'asham, but the asham is a severe type of carbon. Sheyesh le kitzba. It has a set price that it minimally must cost you that money. So if it's a stronger type of carbon, therefore it would be pasul. I would say it pasuls when it comes into the sanctuary. Ella, so Rava Ashi or Rava from Barnish give this following. Here's the following reason of the Rabbanim. Damakra, the pasuk says, "V'chol chatas ashyuva dama," its blood. Only dama shalzu, only the blood of a chatas becomes pasul if it goes into the sanctuary. V'loy dama shal acher, not from any other carbon, even an asha. V'idach, what does Rav Lezer do with that dama? Dama v'loy besari, only if the blood comes into the sanctuary. But let's say the meat of the carbon goes into the sanctuary, the carbon does not become pasul. V'idach, and then how do Chachamim know dama v'loy besara? Because they have it dama. They could learn two things from. It could have said v'chol chatash ashuva dam, if the dam goes in, but it said dama. So you could learn two drushes. V'edech Rav Lezer says dama loy darsh. He doesn't darshan two drushes. Only one. You darshan dama v'loy besara, but you don't darshan dama v'loy dama shalacha. Therefore, Rav Lezer holds that an asham, that the blood goes into the sanctuary, it becomes pasul. it becomes puzzle. Unlike and a chatas as well. But the Chachamim say no, you have a special drasha by a chatas that this din only applies by chatas, not by an asham. So now the Gemara asks another question. Bishlama l'Rabbanan, an unrelated new topic. Bishlam l'Rabbanan, we know that there's something called a mincha. Here, I think I brought it. Here's a carbon mincha. A carbon mincha, I don't know if you can see on the screen here, is like a flower offering, right? And you do the kamitza. Here I have the kamitza up on the screen. You do the kamitza with the hand, and then you put it into a kli shares. You put it into a keli. The kamitza is like, if you compare that to an animal, that's the slaughtering of the animal. When you put it into a little keli over here, then that's like the Kabbalah Saddam. Then you have the halacha, you bring it to the mizbeach, you put salt on it, right? And then you pour it onto the mizbeach, onto the fire. See, he's putting the haktar. That's like sprinkling blood on the mizbeach. And then that's what's done by a mincha. In the Chumash, it says that a mincha is like an asham, and mincha is as holy as an asham and as a chatas. So bishla b'derabbanan the amri asham shachtish leilishma kasha. That according to Rabbanan in our Mishnah, that an asham, that if you shecht it shaloi lishmoi, if you shecht it for a different carbon, it's still a kosher carbon, right? So then I can understand why the Chachamim compare that's why the pasuk says that an asham, that a mincha is like both. Why? Haini the iskish mincha lechatas. A mincha, the Torah says, is like a chatas, and a mincha could be like an asham. The Tanya we learned in a brayza. Rab Shimon says, "Kodesh kachadashim hi kechatas asham." The Torah tells you that a mincha, the flower offering, is like a chatas and an asham. How do you compare it like a chatas and an asham? So the Gemara says, "Minchas choita harei kechatas." A minchas choita is like a chatas. If it's like a minchas choita, remember this is a minchas choita that the guy is using the flower offering as a carbon to bring about an atonement. So then it's like a chatas. Leficha kmatza shloi lishma. If you did the kamitza and you had in mind something else, so then psula, it's pasul. Or you said that it should be like a minchas nedava or something like that. So then you pasul the whole thing. But minchas nedava, a donation type of mincha, harei asham. That's like an asham. Ficha kimsa shloi lishma. If you did the kamitza shloi lishma, not for the sake, you did the kamitza as a different carbon, kshere, it's kosher. So that's why the Torah says that a mincha is partly a chatas and partly an asham. It depends what type of mincha you're bringing. If it's a minchas chayta, it's like a chatas, and if it's a minchas nedava, it's like an asham. Ela Rab Lezer, but according to Rab Lezer of our Mishnah, L'may hilkasa ishka mincha lechatas mincha asham. Why is a mincha like a chatas, and why, more importantly, is it like an asham? Either way, it has the stringencies that if you did the kamitza, shaloi l'shma, it's going to be pasul. And says the Gemara, L'chi idach Rab Shimon. That teaches you another thought of Rab Shimon. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, shaloi b'kshisaras psula. If you forget, according to the Tanakama, if you did not put the kamitza into a klisharis, like he's putting it into a keli, and then bringing it with the keli onto the mizbeach, it's possible. If you just took it with your hand and threw it onto the mizbeach, if you took that flour kamitza and threw it onto the mizbeach, it's possible. According to the Tanakama, comes along Rab Shimon and says it's kosher. Rab Shimon says machshe, it's a good mincha. What is the reason of Rab Shimon? Amakra, the pasuk says, now notice a chatas actually is sprinkled on the mizbeach with your right hand finger. An asham is splashed on the mizbeach. You splash it like as you can see, like you see over here, like you splash it with a keli. So that's what we're saying like this. A chatas, a mincha could be like both. If you want to use your hand, then you could take the whole kamitz in your hand. Don't put it into a klishares. Just hold on to it with your right hand, bring it onto the mizbeach, and throw it like onto the mizbeach with your right hand, like a carbon chatas. Which a carbon chatas you take with the blood on your hand, and you sprinkle the four top corners of the mizbeach. But bechli, if with a mincha, if you wanted to use a keli, Oiv de bismol, just use your left hand, ka'asham, with like an asham. So for this reason, the Torah compared a mincha like a chatas and an asham. So okay, so now Reb Shimon, Haikra mapik le'lahochi, mapik le'lahochi. How could Reb Shimon himself use two teachings of a mincha that it's a chatas and asham to tell you one that you don't need a keli, and previously it tells you that depends. Sometimes if you do the kmitza shloi lishma, it's possible, and sometimes it's kosher. How do you learn two things from kechatas v'ka'asham? That a mincha is like a chatas and asham. Answers the Gemara, Ika Krola Kadhu de Rebbe Chiyudase. You're right. The real chatas v'ka'asham is to teach you that you can use a mincha, you can do the mincha with your hand. How do you know that a minchas chayta, that if you did the kmitza shaloi lishma, how do you know that's possible? That I have another pasuk. Chatas tamamai. What's the reason why you did shaloi lishma by chatas? Why is a chatas shaloi lishma possible? Why the ksibahi? Minchas chayta name ksibahi. There's an extra word he, only it. That means telling you that you have to do it lishmai. If you do it shloi lishmai, even a mincha chayta will be, if you did the kmitza shloi lishmai, it would be a minchas chayta. If you did it shloi lishmai, it would be invalid. Ula rabbanam, my hilkasa ishkas asham lachatas. Getting back to the original question, according to Rabbanan, why is a carbon asham like a chatas? According to Rabbanan, asham is very different than a chatas. A chatas yishech shaloi lishmai is pasal, and asham if yishech shaloi lishmai it's kosher. Yet the Torah says kechatas v'ka'asham. They're both one and the same. So what's that teach you? That teaches you, that hekesh teaches you, machatas tu unismicha, af oshim ton smicha. Just like a chatas, you have to put your hands on the animal before you slaughter it. So also, by an oshim, you also have to put your hands on it before you slaughter it. Now we learned, let's go back into the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, to go back to the Mishnah, we're gonna just tell you the basic idea of the Gemara over here. The Mishnah said that Amma Yosi ben Chayni Omer. Here's the third opinion in the Mishnah. Hanishchotim l'shem Pesach or l'shem Chatas Pesula. Yosi ben Chayni said that if you shech the animal, if you shech any shlomim, right? If you shech any shlomim and say it's a carbon Chatas, or you say it's a carbon Pesach, you passel the whole carbon. So let's say I take an oila, instead of shechting it for a shlamim, I shecht it for a pesach and a chatas. According to the Tanakama, that's still kosher. It's shloi l'shmam, it's kosher. But here, according to Yossi ben Chayni, if you shecht an oila or any carbon and say it's a pesach or say it's a chatas, that carbon becomes pasel. What does Rabbi Lezer hold in that case? So here, the Gemara just brings a machlokes, and then we'll just go back to something else. The Gemara brings a machlokes. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Yossi ben Chayni, Rabbi Lezer Omer Tavra Echad, and Rabba Ba'acherim l'shem chatas pligi. So according to the way you learn it is like this: is a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabba, as you can see on the screen. Rabbi Yochanan says both Rabbi Lezer and Yossi ben Chayni both agree one of the same. Except by Asham, but it's one of the same because even Reb Eliezer will hold that if you shecht a carbon oila for a Pesach or a Chatas, it becomes pasal. So it doesn't matter. So Reb Eliezer would agree to Yosef ben Koini. Comes along Rabba and says not true. Rabbi Eliezer will only agree to Yosef ben Koini's idea if you shecht it for a carbon Pesach. But if you shecht it for a carbon chatas, then Rabbi Lezer says it's kosher. Even if you shecht an oila as a carbon chatas, according to Rabba's understanding, Rabbi Lezer, it's kosher, and that's what he says. Rabba Amma Bacher l'shem chatas pligi. That whereas Yosi will say it's pasal, and Rabbi Lezer says it's kosher. And then the Gemara brings a whole brisa. We're going to skip the brisa, but the bottom line is each one is trying to understand what is Rabbi Lezer's opinion. Again, what is Rabbi Lezer's opinion regarding a a oila that is shechted for a carbon chatas. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Leza says it's possible, just like Yosef ben Chaini said. According to Rabbi Leza says it's kosher. Let's go on Amid Beis. Shimon Achi Azaria Oima. Okay, we're up to Shimon Achi Azaria Oima. This is the fourth opinion in the Mishnah. And so what is the fourth opinion of our Mishnah? That's what he said. Let's go back to the Mishnah again. Rabbi Shimon is the fourth opinion in the Mishnah. Shimon, Achi Azaria Oimar, Shimon, the brother of Achi Azaria, says, it depends. Shochta, let's say I have a carbon shlamim, okay? That's called kachim kalam, the light carbon. It's light kachim. And I sheshachtem l'shem gavoya. And I shecht the shlamim, according to his opinion, I shecht it as a oila. Or I shecht it as a carbon oila, which is kachim, right? A shlamim that you shecht as a kachim, then it's kosher. But let's say I shechted oila as a shlamim, the reverse. I shecht the carbon oila and say it's a shlamim, so I'm taking it down a notch, pesulin. Then it's possible. That's what he says. Kache kachim, for example, an oila, sheshachtum l'shem kachim kalam, and you shecht it as a shlamim, so then it's psulim. Kache kalam, but a shlamim, sheshachtum l'shem kache kachim, that you shecht it as kache kachim, kesherim. So he makes a caveat that it has to be somewhat, in order for it to be kosher, it has to be something that is lower than it, higher than it. Rav Ashi Masna Rabbi Achi, Rav Ashi Masna Shmeid Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav Acha Brei Rav Masna Shmeid Rabbi Yanai. My Talmud of Shimon Achi Azariah. What is the reason of Shimon Achi Azariah? The Amakra, the pasuk says, "V'lo yichalo es kotche b'nei Yisrael eish asher yirimu l'Hashem." So the Torah is telling you the way he reads it, like a Hasidish person. He reads it like you're not going to do anything wrong if you shech the carbon by elevating it. You shech the shlamim and you give it a higher name. But murim mehen, if you give it a higher name, ein mischalin, it doesn't become, you didn't do anything wrong. And it's still kosher carbon. But if you take an oila and you make it into a shlamim, then mischalin, then the whole carbon becomes pasal. So that's the pasuk. Says the Gemara, is that's what it's coming for? I need it for Shmuel. The Amo Shmuel said, I need this possible is how do I know that if I eat tevel, I eat from fruits that you didn't take off truma from it, truma samaisris, that you get the death penalty. Since you could have din ba'asid litrum hakazim dabar, the Torah tells you don't eat from it because you still didn't give the truma. You're supposed to give the truma, and we darshan yichalol techalol a gzereshava that if you do that, you're going to get misa. So I need this pasuk to teach you that you get tevel for misa. So how could I learn another din of what Shimon Achi Azariah taught us? So the Gemara says, "Im came lichtev kra." Let the pasuk say ashahurmu. If it's only teaching what Shimon Achi Azariah said, then it says ashahurmu. Ashirimu baside. Why ashirimu? Why does it say it in the future tense? Shmami notarte. We see two ideas from this pasuk. One idea is that a carbon will only become pasul only if you shecht it for something of lower kedusha than it, but not if you shecht it for higher kedusha. And also you learn another din that if you eat from a fruits and you didn't take trumas amaisus from it, it's misa. Continues the Gemara. Boy Rab Zera said, what did Rabbi Shimon Achi Azariah said? If you shechta a shlamim as an oila, it's kasha ve'emaratzin, and you'd have to bring a new carbon shlamim. And he argues against the chamim by one thing, that if you shecht an oila for a shlamim, then it's possible. Whereas the Chacham says an oila for a shlamim, it's still a kosher carbon. And maybe Shimon Achi Azariah is arguing in 2 points. One, if you shechted oila for a shlamim, it's kosher. Shimon says it's possible. Another thing is the opposite way. Shlamim shechted for an oila, the Chachamim say you have to bring a new shlamim. And Shimon Achi Azariah says it's kosher, and you don't even have to bring a new carbon. The Bailam got appeased. He was yotzei. Amar Abayi Teram Zika Tashma coming here. From the Mishnah it says, Habchor v'Amaisa sheshachtel shem shlamim. what happens? You see a kachim kalam of a bechor meiser that you shechted as a shlomim. Shlomim is a higher form of kachim kalam. Kesherim, it's kasha. Shlomim sheshachtem l'shem bechor l'shem psulim. But if you reversed it, so you're going down in levels of kachim kalam, psulim. B'yisal kedaitzes ksherim maratzem. If that's example, bechor bar retzuyihi. This example that you're giving me, a bechor ma'aseh that you shechted l'shem shalom is ksherim. What do you mean? Bechor is something that you required to bring a new animal, and it's not something that's brought as a kapara or as a donation. El kasherim, the ein maratzin must be what he's trying to say. It's kosher, but it doesn't. It doesn't. You don't get the ritzui, and therefore the sefer kasherim maratzin reishanamik shem maratzin. So the Gemara wants to say is that what Rashi ben Achiyazai will hold is that if the shlomim is shechted for an oila, it's kosher, but the bailam will have to bring a new shlomim. So the Gemara says, "Midi iri, what's your proof? Hakadis v'alkadus." It could be one is talking about shlomim kachim kalim, but it's possible when you shecht a shlomim for an oila, you get the kapara. You yaitza. So why did he use that example in the Sefer of kachim kalim that have no ritzui, that has nothing to do with as a donation, that you're giving it as a donation? Tanina. So Keitza kachim shachtam shem kachim kalim. So why did he give us a case of kachim kalim that there are levels in different kachim kalims? So the Gemara says, I would have thought. When you're dealing with kachi kachim and kachi kalam, then there's a height and a lower part. A kalam, but on kachim kalam, maybe light. You don't say there's a higher level of a kachim kalam or not higher level of a kachim kalam. That's the chiddush of the Sefer of the Mishnah. That what? That bechor is a lower version of a kachim kalam than a shlomim. Says the Gemara, Hanami Tanimim, Shlomin Kachim Kaitim is Bechar. If two people are standing in the base of Migdash, one is bringing a carbon Shlomim, one is bringing the Bechar, another Mishnah tells us that Shlomim come before the Bechar. Shlomim has more halachas to it, and therefore it comes before the Bechar. And says the Gemara, Ha'ikar, our Mishnah is the main source for that Mishnah. He agraga nasa. There, that's just bringing it along. But here is our source that shlomim is a higher level of kachim kalam than a bechar. But could be that the Shimon Achiyazai will hold that if you bring a carbon as a higher level, not only is it a kosher carbon, but the bailam does not have to bring a new carbon. Let's take a half a minute and do the Mishnah, and then we'll stop. Ha-Pesach sheshachtu shachris barba asa. Carbon Pesach, that you didn't wait till the afternoon. What did you do? Right away in the morning, you shechted your animal as a carbon Pesach, shloi l'shmoi, but you shechted it as an oila. So Rabbi Yeshua Machsher, Rabbi Yeshua says it's kosher. Why? Because a Pesach before 12 o'clock is a shlomim anyway. So it's basically a shlomim being shechted as an oila, and therefore Rabbi Yeshua says it's kosher. It's as if you shechted it on the 30th day. It's a shlomim that's shechted for an oila, and therefore it's kosher. Ben Beseira Paisal Kili Nishchak Bein Abayim. Ben Beseira says it's pasul because it's as if you shechted it as a carbon Pesach that was shechted after 12 o'clock, and you shechted it as an oila. A carbon Pesach that you shecht as an oila becomes pasul right away, even though you're shechting it in the morning. We'll see more about that tomorrow. Says the Gemara, and says the Mishnah, concludes the Mishnah, and then we'll end. This is the fifth opinion of all this. Amar Shimon ben Azai. I have a tradition from the Sanhedrin, the 72 Sanhedrin. And the day that they put Rab Lezer ben Azariah as the Rosh Hashiva, the following is the rule. Any carbon that you normally eat from, like a shlomim, if you shecht it shloi lishman, then kasher, and it's kosher. So if a shlomim gets geshacht and as an oila, then it's kosher. Putzman a pesach and a chatas, a separate carbon pesach and a chatas, which is eaten. If you shecht shloi lishman, it's pasul. So ben Azay basically, Ben Azay is basically saying that an oila that is shechted for a shlamim that would be possible because that's not a carbon that's eaten. An oil is totally brought on the mizbeach and burned. The Chachamim didn't agree. Chachamim hold that an oil that's geschachten as a shlamim, it's still a kosher carbon. Okay, so we have 5 opinions on this matter. Okay, we stop.
Right.